All right, welcome everyone to Accuracy in America. I'm Don Irvine and joined by my co-host Brian McNichol.
Good morning. Hello, deplorables, drags, despicables, chumps, Neanderthals, and of course those dog-faced honey soldiers.
So as those that are watching, you can tell that Brian is not in his normal home location,
Yeah,
but is now in Katy, Texas,
that's right.
visiting with some family. Brian's got more family than I know anybody else around here, but this is what happens when you grow up in the South. You get a lot of family, and we won't
Good.
discuss why.
No, it's a good thing. Well, there's limited other entertainment options, you know.
Yeah, okay. If you're family with Brian, you can chime in on that comment if you're watching. All right, we got plenty of news as
Yeah, we
usual.
do.
We had some interesting things have been really developing here in the last week. But yesterday was kind of the big bombshell, I guess you could call it, with the whole Governor Cuomo thing. I mean, here's the Attorney General, of New York, Tisha James. I mean, she finishes her investigation, and she says, "Yeah,
Hardcore partisan Democrat.
right."
You
And
know.
she says, "Yes, Governor Cuomo is guilty of sexual harassment." I mean, 11 women had come out and spoken out against him, and Cuomo's reaction was just laughable. But I want to get your comments on this.
I thought the idea that he would try to react that way. I was trying to help these girls, and they were in tough situations, and I was talking through their problems with them, and I tried, but I did not succeed. It's like, dude, that's not going to get you out of this, right? Because their accounts of this are that you were putting your hands on them and doing asking them forceful, improper questions. If you go reading through like what these women actually accused him of, it's pretty sleazy stuff. It's not, these are not borderline calls, as he's trying to present them. But that said, the Biden has called for him to resign. The four neighboring state governors have all called for him to resign. Um, the Albany County DA has received the evidence and is said to be investigating, so he could end up with legal problems with this. And I think the federal government, some of these charges she said state and federal charges. So there's some federal government, and I think that probably has to do with employment law, federal employment law. But you don't know what's out there. But he's in a lot of trouble. But all that said, he's a Democrat in a Democrat state, and he can survive. Ralph Northam survived. Do you think he'll survive?
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, I don't know. This will be interesting because I mean, these are serious charges. We're still kind of an E2 environment, type of thing like this. I mean, there's going to be a lot of pressure. I mean, when you start getting top Democrats, when you get the president of the United States, you get the House, Senate Majority Leader, the House, and House Speaker, all these people, and those, like you said, the governors of the neighboring states, all these people coming out, Senator Gillibrand. I mean, people are just coming out and they're saying like, no, you've got to resign, and others say, otherwise he'll have to be impeached. I think he's in serious trouble. I was really shocked by by this report in the sense that, as you had alluded to, Letitia James is a hardcore Democrat partisan, and she went ahead and did this and put this out. I mean, this was not swept under the rug or anything like this. And it came out. Now she may have her own political ambitions, right? This is part of the whole process with these people. They see an opening with this, but you have Cuomo who's weakened on this, and he's still kind of weakened on the nursing home issue too. I mean, he's taken some hits on this, and then you add in his brother and CNN. It's like this is just not good.
Okay, yeah. So a couple of things you brought up there. First of all, the brother, was working with him on how to respond and how to answer these charges and so forth. So the brother is covering the story and being part of the story, and that's always I know journalism ethics is You're talking about a dead letter. There's more people speaking Latin today than there are trying to honor journalism ethics. But that is, that's a complete no-no of journalism ethics, to be inside a story like that and covering that story. I don't, expect CNN to do anything about it. I think they liked that they were that close to the access of all this. They had that inside person. I think they actually see it as an advantage. Also, if you're sympathetic to him in any way, or to, Democrats or whatnot, that sort of gives you something to hang your hat on. The other thing you said is he's on some shaky ground on a lot of areas here. And, the timing of it's interesting. So, if you force him out over sexual harassment charges, which, no one's saying he raped anybody or anything. So there's unlikely to be anything there. You can put him in prison for any significant period of time for. Does he not elide the stuff about the nursing homes? Because that people did die there, and you can argue that he knew what was going on and did it anyway, and that the reason behind it was politics, and that him playing politics with these people cost them their lives. So that may be a better tort claim than a criminal charge, but the timing of this is a little suspicious, right? So you have Biden back with mask mandates, economy collapsing, Biden's popularity collapsing, Harris 10, 15 points underwater, right? The vice president. So, the timing of, let's dump, let's spit out Andrew Cuomo, to the masses is a little curious too.
With this CNN thing too, do you think, as much as CNN has based kind of just given, Chris Cuomo saying it's fine, they've kind of looked the other way. Do you think this kind of is coming back to bite them a little bit now? Is that they let Chris do too much, and it really reflects negatively on the network? Not like the network had a great reputation to begin with.
Right. They need to, that's a question though for them to ask. I would not be surprised if they sort of, made a public episode out of this with him and said, you're suspended for 2 days or something like that. But, it's way out of line. You can't cover stories like that. You can't get in and make the news on people like that.
Yeah, well,
I think, I think a lot of people, if you look at it, it's like, yeah, let's talk about him, grabbing these girls inappropriately. Let's don't talk about the nursing homes, right? I think it just looks to me like an attempt to get around the nursing home problem.
And I did see a story yesterday. I didn't read the story, but I saw a story where he was part of his defense was that he released a bunch of pictures with like and Obama, hugging, kissing, whatever other people and stuff like that. Now, look, granted, Cuomo, that's an Italian. It's a European. There is a lot of hugging and a lot of line between what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. There's always, we've had this little bit of a thing about Biden and some of his little bit touchy-feely stuff, more so, but still, come on, this is your defense, is it to release a bunch of pictures of the last two Democrat presidents, that have gone into this. I don't see this as really.
He takes them on too, right? So now like Biden and Obama are not his friends, right? That's I will say this, you can probably have Biden mad at you and survive in the Democratic Party. I don't think you can get very far if you have Obama against you.
Yeah,
you can still turn too many levers,
Look, if you're Joe Biden, the last thing you want to do is have a bunch of pictures released of you doing all this stuff that came up during the campaign that you tried to get rid of and dismiss. And now you've got the governor of New York throwing this out as a defense as why it's okay to do what I did.
Yeah, who needs a lifeline? He needs someone to come out and say, boys will be boys or whatever they're going to say, right? And now he's gone and said the people who could probably most readily help him, get lost. I'm not, I don't need your help.
Yeah, and the Democrat, he put the Democrats in a difficult situation in a lot of ways, because they have to take, they really need to take a strong stand on this, because otherwise they will look like nothing but a bunch of hypocrites when it comes to this kind of stuff, right? So they have to come out strong. Otherwise, it's like, okay, well then you stand for nothing at this point.
And ladle on top of that is, they've run afoul of women a little bit here lately, right? Like with the transgender in sports, their political correctness wires got crossed there. And, that's something where Democrats came out against something that was very anti-woman. And there's 2 or 3 other little things out there that, like, they haven't really been the friend of women that, they portray themselves as being. And now here's you're kind of giving them something that doesn't amount to much in the form of Cuomo.
All right. So Kristen Martin, are you still?
Yeah, that's where we are.
Is she one of your relatives?
Yes.
She said, "Poor Janice Dean," which is another part of the story, because Janice Dean is getting, she's going to get a lot more on Fox earlier today, because she has led the fight on the whole nursing home thing, because she lost her in-laws in a nursing home in New York. So she has a very personal loss with all of this. I guess in some ways it's a little bit of vindication, but the real vindication was to have Cuomo out of office and may see him face some criminal charges for the whole. This is like the worst thing to happen to the Cuomo family. I mean, Andrew Cuomo may have just killed the Cuomo political dynasty here at this point in time.
Yeah, that's right.
Who knows?
But it's New York.
All right. So another. Yeah. I mean, we don't know, but I mean,
he could survive.
Yeah, I mean, and it's Democrat politics and all these. But if they, yeah, I mean, she's saying here too, is Me Too not a thing in New York? I mean, that's what we're trying to find out, is how strong is the Me Too movement in New York with the Democrats? Is it going to be just now? Is it fleeting, or is it a longer term situation where people remember it? Republicans can take advantage of this potentially. I mean, but the registration numbers and all those kinds of things make it kind of tough. Even, I mean, Curtis Sliwa, I mean, I mean, running in New York, I mean, he's got this thing, running, can he win in November for the mayoral race? What's going to happen in I don't know how all this plays out, but, maybe it gives the Republicans a little bit more of a push than they had before. I think we'll have to wait and see how this turns out, but it won't, if Cuomo survives, it won't be the first time in our history, in our lifetimes, that we've seen a Democrat survive despite their ethical and moral lapses.
Yeah, Ralph Northam.
Yeah.
He was dead in the water.
Yeah, I always think about Diggs and Jerry Studs and all the people who survived a lot of things, were Republicans who had similar issues. They got wiped out. But the Democrats always seem to turn a blind eye to certain behavior and say, no, but we love him, so we're going to reelect him. We don't care if he stole money. I mean, look, for heaven's sakes, Rod Blagojevich is coming back, right? He's trying to come back. I mean, shoot. I mean, if he gets clearance, he could run. He could run and become, for governor of Illinois again, right? I mean, anything is possible with politics in these heavily Democrat states. So
thanks to Trump pardoning him.
Yeah, I know, of all things.
It's really funny. It's like, why did he do that?
Yeah. I don't know. We'll have to just kind of wait to see how that one plays out. But I did want to talk about, another thing that's troubling the Biden administration now, which is this kind of zigzag confusion about mask mandates, vaccine policy, all of these things. I mean, we have the Delta variant, which is getting a ton of media attention. The media is making this big deal as if the Delta variant are like they're all brand new cases, and these hospitalizations and all these other things are a real cause for concern. But that's really not the story there, right? I mean, that's not really the truth of the story with the variant. And we're not really getting any clear messaging from the Biden administration. And, his poll numbers on handling of the pandemic now, this issue, they're now dropping. The Democrats are finding, right? The Democrats are finding that, all the things they criticized Trump for, they're running into issues that this is not as easy as they thought it was. So it's easy to criticize the other guy when you don't really have the power. Now that you're in power, it's like, oh, wait a minute.
Yeah, this is tough. Yeah, and so they have been confusing what they've been saying. There's some questions about what they can legally do that have come up now, because it's going to be hard to demonstrate that this is the emergency that it was the first time, regardless of what you think of how deadly or dangerous the Delta variants are and the other various variants that are out there. We now know a lot about this that we didn't know the first time around, and there's a lot of resistance to mask mandates on both political sides. It'll hurt you with some Democrats too. It'll hurt in school, okay? But the government is now, as the CDC said yesterday, that they want everybody wearing masks again, and everybody who's inside, and everyone who goes in a school building, and even though kids are really not at risk of this at all. So they were, to me, it's like it wasn't so much confusing as inevitable. We were just sort of waiting for them to get back to everybody needs to wear a mask, because you kind of knew they wanted to go there. Again, what else is back there on this, right? Because all of a sudden in California, the governor is in real trouble. There's a recall election, and there's 40 candidates or whatever, and there's some of them are pretty bizarre people. So the alternative is not clear yet, but the polling for recalling Newsom is at least even, and maybe a little in favor of recalling him. And it's moving in that direction because of his handling of the pandemic and his handling of San Francisco and so forth, where the quality of life in these cities is really declining. So, is this done to help Newsom? Because California just announced that, since we're returning to mask mandates, we're going to return to, we're mailing out 10 zillion ballots, and, grab 7 or 8 and send them back in. That'll be your vote, So,
as Kristen points out, mask mandates in Texas with 1,000 people walking through the border every day. I mean,
right.
That's another issue that the Biden administration is, they're not addressing this at all. They've had that two kind of full problem, which is just the surge of the migrants over the border after they took over. And then it's the fact that you've got these people, who are not tested in essence, and then they get freed up, and then they go places and, creating problems. The administration can't seem to figure out how to get past the 70% that have had of the population. The population's had one shot. I mean, now they're saying, how about let's pay everybody $100 to get vaccinated? It's like, how much money are we spending? We're trying to bribe people to get vaccinated. I do believe in individual liberty and individual choice, but a lot of people are learning that it seems to be with Delta, more of the people that have gotten Delta have been more than vaccinated, right? And you can be vaccinated and still get Delta, but symptom, or you'll be asymptomatic. Your chances that you will die is very low. The death rates have not really spiked, but the media is now focusing on
you die are very low anyway with the Delta. All the variants, everything that happens from here on out is going to be less severe than the original, right? That's the way variants work. The weaker viruses are the ones that survive, right? They don't attach to something and kill it and grind all their energy into it. That's not a favorable outcome for the virus. So the viruses become less virulent. So you have, we're making a big deal out of something that's even less than the thing we made too big a deal out of before. Because you're talking about something, now, especially with the amount of people who are going to get it and have no symptoms at all, and thus no reason to get tested, and thus never know that they had it. You're talking about survival rates north of 99.999%, right? So, why are we locking down? This is when it's going to have to run its course. The only way out is through. And, we can do this now, or we can do this later, or we can keep waiting until a Republican wins and puts a stop to it. But it's going to end the same way whenever it ends, right? It's going to end with herd immunity being achieved, which it probably already has, and the hysteria that the Democrats try to create around this stuff losing its sting. I think the mask thing is unpopular enough on both sides that could be the fulcrum that sort of forces it. Now, what my Kristen was talking about, everyone that I have talked to in Texas since I've been here has been very concerned about the buses of people getting through the border. Supposedly more than 1 million illegals have gotten into the U.S. this year, right? We were always told there's 11 million in the whole country. Well, which is probably a low figure, right? We've talked about that before. But if 1 million are getting in, that's a big increase. That's a gigantic 1 year surge, right? And it's not a year, it's February to early August where we are now. So, I think there's some reckoning that has to be done there. And I think that their handling of the border is going to be a big political problem for them as the elections approach.
So Bob, as we know, had been kind of vacationing a little bit recently. He says, one thing that struck me in traveling to and from Cape Cod over the past couple of weeks was the irony of how stringent the mask requirements were at the airports, except the one place air is released in close proximity, the bars. Did not see a whole lot of mask lowering and raising there, perpetual eating and drinking clearly the norm, which is what my wife tries to mean, which is what they try to discourage, is that constant make it look like you're going to snack and drink for 5 hours when you're on a plane, right? And type of thing like that. But it is extremely uneven. And it just there's a huge problem. I mean, I don't know if you saw this report. I saw this story this morning briefly about, I guess yesterday on CNN, the H director was on there, and he apparently said that parents should mask at home. And then he had to walk that back. He had to try to clarify that. He said that he really kind of garbled that whole message, and that he tried to explain that out there. But the initial reaction was extremely negative. Like parents are going to have to mask at home. I mean, it's like what country are we living in here?
Right. Good luck enforcing that one, buddy. You're going to go door to door and make them do it. Because that's we've been talking about this. If you're going to make a rule, you have to enforce it, right? If they're not going to enforce it, if they're just going to leave it up to us, don't make the rule. Let us figure it out for ourselves. But it's the arbitrary enforcement of the rules that drives people crazy.
Yeah, Kristen brings up Lollapalooza. I don't know if you saw those crowds, but they were mammoth. And Lori Lightfoot, and then plus we had, and we also had locally
updated sanctions till that was over. She's like, it goes into effect. We're going to make you do this and this and this. Goes into effect when Lollapalooza is. It's like, so it's not really about science, right? It's about politics,
right? Yeah, well, I mean, look, and then Muriel Bowser gets, they snap a picture of her at a wedding, without a mask and everything like that, and she's getting, it's like, look, if you're going to put these rules out, you better, you got to follow your own rules from. It's like, just like you said, it's absolutely ridiculous. The hypocritical liberal politicians that are doing these things, but this control mechanism that they want to have on here. It's like, look, Montgomery County, where I live, tomorrow they're going to, the county council is going to look at a proposal where they'll be looking at the numbers of daily infections and weekly infections, and when it hits a certain level, which is pretty close to right now, then they will automatically impose indoor mask mandates. But once again, I think the data is not really clearly accurate on this part, because they're treating this as if these are all whole new COVID cases overall. And a lot of these things are coming up where people are being tested because they have to be tested to enter their workspace or that type of thing like that. They've already been vaccinated. The chances that they're going to transmit anything is pretty low. We've talked, I've already mentioned hospitalizations and death rates are still, extremely low by comparison. So, they're getting all bent out of shape over these things right now. You and I, we don't want anybody to die from any of these things, but for heaven's sakes, this whole liberal knee jerk reaction to this thing is that we want you to wear a mask. We want you to do this. Here's the rules that the government is laying down, and this is how you have to follow and live your life. I'm sorry. This is America. This is not how I want to live my life.
Right. And it's like, it's about telling us, being able to make us do things, right? I mean, it's about compelling behavior. That's what this is about, is making you do something. I mean, that's what they're trying to achieve, is that you accept that.
Right. So I want to move. Yeah, so I'm going to move on briefly to this next story because it's still a little bit murky, and I don't know, maybe you've read some more about it. So we had an attack yesterday, a very strange thing, an attack at the Metrobus platform at the Pentagon. And I guess a Pentagon officer was stabbed and he died from his wounds. They then apparently killed the assailant, for which they really don't know a whole lot about. But it's not, the FBI, we're not really getting much information on that, except that it created the situation of, I guess, the whole metro was shut. They had to bypass the Pentagon. And I've been to that Pentagon metro a couple of times, and this was like 30 years ago, 40 years ago. And it's a pretty busy place. I mean, that's how you get a lot of people in there, right? Is that workers come and go.
That, if you don't live in DC, but it's a nexus, right? It's a transfer station, right? You're getting off yellow and blue, and there's a big chunk of Northern Virginia that goes to the Pentagon and then gets on trains into DC. Like underneath the Pentagon, where we're doing our war fighting planning and all this stuff, there are thousands of commuters a day. And before 9/11, there were tens of thousands of people parked in their parking lots. They have big, massive parking lots that commuters used, right? So, they ended that then, but there's still, tons and tons of people in the Pentagon, in the metro part of the Pentagon every day, who have nothing to do with the military. This guy, he's from Georgia. He had been charged with criminal trespass and some other kind of stuff down there. Like, he went in somebody's house and did a bunch of yelling and screaming and destroying. And they released him. He hadn't gone to trial yet. He appears to have some anger issues and mental problems and so forth. And so I don't think it's like a terrorist deal.
Right.
And, you never know. And, you also don't know that what you've already been told, whether what you've already been told is true on any of this stuff, because, now we're at a point where almost anything anybody like that tells you has to be questioned, because you can't trust them. So it's going to be interesting to see. I don't think you'll hear a whole lot more about this. I could be wrong, but it looked to me like, a crazy got loose.
Yeah, and it's tragic that this officer lost his life over this type of thing. But once again, this is where we have law enforcement. All these people, is that we need these. That guy protected a lot of other people. Could have saved a lot of other lives from this crazy person. So we thank him for that. But it's a tragedy that he lost his life over this incident. Very unfortunate. But it's just that when part of it is that when you see a story that says the Pentagon and this thing, there's going to be this reaction. It's like, oh my, you want to okay, there's a lot of important stuff that goes on over there. We had an attack on 9/11.
It's the largest office building in the world. It's like 50,000 people work there.
Yeah. So the radar kind of gets raised a little bit when you see that. You kind of want to learn more. But I think you're right. In the end, we're not going to learn a whole lot more about, maybe the next big story will be the funeral for this officer, when it comes or something like that, and all of that. But at least I think the people that came through there, when they reopen the Pentagon station and all that stuff, they'll feel that at least they know the system worked, as unfortunate it was for the officer and everything. Ohio had some special elections and primaries yesterday, but the real interesting one was the primary for the seat that Marcia Fudge vacated when she won the administration. And it was interesting because you had a far left, you have the real progressive candidate, then you had the more establishment candidate who was underfunded, by comparison, and she won. So this is Shontel Brown beats Nina Turner, and I'd say basically that was an upset. She wasn't really expected to win. but on the other hand, the Turner campaign had not been polling lately, which also was a signal that maybe they saw there was a shift going on here that for this, but it's a defeat for the progressive wing here on this, the Bernie Sanders types.
Progressive wing is in some. They've had a little string of defeats. I think Democrats are looking at the polling numbers all around for them. They're not terrible, but they're not moving in the right direction. Biden is down below 50% now in overall popularity, not much down, but all the directions on those things are moving down. His trust, as you said earlier, trust in how well he's handling the pandemic is dropped off. Confidence in the government, in his government, which is not really all a reflection on him. It's part, it's some frustration with Congress and other stuff, down like 12 points in 2 weeks. So poll numbers not looking good for them. And I think that, they're starting to say, we got a little too crazy. And so now we've got all these, that always happens when you assemble a majority, right? You're going to have, you do that by winning all the ones you can. And by getting you end up with some outlier candidates, right? And then when there's realignment, those are the candidates who lose, right? So, and then that may take you a little below the majority. So, interesting. Also, that was Ohio 11, Ohio 15. Mike Carey, who is the Trump-endorsed candidate, won handily. He appears to have destroyed the other opponents. Pretty good, 37 to I think 13 was the next one. And that's a Republican district. He's almost certain to win the general, replacing Stevers, Congressman Stevers, who left to become head of the Ohio Chamber of Commerce. So
yeah,
so a good result for Trump. And the guy coming right out, which I thought was interesting. His statement is, thank you, President Trump, for believing in me and endorsing me and putting me on the path to victory. So, he apparently thought at least that having Trump on his side was a positive.
Yeah, I don't really know how to judge, the whole Trump effect on a lot of things. I mean, it's, until you get someone like this speaking out like this, because it's, is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? I mean, there were a lot of pundits that went after, thought that Trump, his influence had been severely weakened, when Susan Wright lost in Texas.
Right.
But
one candidate.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, yeah, how do you judge on one here and one there overall? I mean, I think, Trump has amassed a huge war chest. He's got tremendous influence still over the party and everything like this. It seems that to me that Democrats, the media, one thing they spend a lot of time on is trying to pick that apart. They're trying to use that as some kind of lever, saying like, oh, this is really bad. The Republicans are beholden to Trump, and so this is going to be really bad news for them in 2022 and beyond and everything like that. But look, I'm not a huge Trump guy overall, but I don't see where that's hurting them that much at this point in time. He's raising money. He's getting out there doing things. As long as he doesn't say anything really, far out, I'm fine, and so he still has influence and people want his support.
Yeah, I think that the Republicans should not run away from him in 2022. I think that there's no reason to do that. You're going to get, like Glenn Youngkin, you're going to get smeared, so to speak, as a Trump person, no matter what you do. So you might as well do it and have all the people who do like Trump strongly behind you.
Yeah,
I think it's conduct. I think he's been spot on here. He's supporting. He's spending money strategically, and he's staying out of the fray, largely out of the fray, right? And then just making things happen without his direct involvement.
Yeah, one thing I get, I just kind of laugh at is the emails I get from Terry McAuliffe, and I guess it's because I'm on some Democrat list of some sort, and which is fine because to read to see their emails, particularly their subject lines and stuff like that is amusing. It makes me laugh during the day, but virtually every single email McAuliffe campaign is one of desperation. It's like, oh, Youngkin's dropped out of another debate. or, the race is really close. It's perilously close. We need your money now. And then all the ties that they're trying to make, he's going to impose, anything that Donald Trump wants him to do, that type of a thing like that. It goes back to what I said early on when we first discussed McAuliffe and Youngkin, was just that it seems that McAuliffe is spending a lot of time trying to tie Youngkin to Trump without really coming up with a lot of really good ideas on his own part as to what he would do if he was elected governor for the second time. It just, I don't know if you win a race in Virginia by doing that. Maybe you do, but it just seems like an odd thing.
It looks like they don't really have much to run on. And I also get the emails from Mark Herring, who's the Attorney General, is running for re-election, real radical, hardcore leftist, AG of Virginia. And, his is like, we're not doing good in fundraising, guys. You got to help us out here. We're getting worried. I've said a lot of them, we're getting concerned, which is, maybe that's, how you speak to Democrats. You play on fear and like, boy, the bad orange man, bad people will be in charge and we won't be able to be free or happy again. But there's a lot of them. The theme of almost all Herring's emails are, we're ladies and gentlemen, we need help here. We're not doing good, and we need more money and more enthusiasm and more assistance. And I mean, in his case, he's running against a fairly unknown guy. A lawyer from the beach who can't really spend a lot of time campaigning because he has a bunch of small kids and he's running this law firm and he has to spend 3 or 4 days a week running the law firm. So for Mark Herring to be in trouble, I think suggests if that's indeed the case, and it's hard for me to believe that it's totally not the case, when it's the theme of that much of their communications, signals a pretty big shift.
Yeah, I just wonder if Democrats are now, a little apathetic about the whole thing. I mean, the idea of tying any of these guys to Trump, I just don't know if that resonates with Democrat voters. Like, Trump's not in office. He's not the president anymore. He hasn't been in office for the last 6+ months. He may have influence.
He really doesn't have much to say about Virginia, right? I mean,
right.
What does he say about Virginia?
Yeah, I mean, how much influence is Trump going to have on Virginia politics? I mean, it's like, let's be realistic here, and I think the voters understand that. I mean, and without Trump being the big national figure, he's not daily news as much as the Democrats would love him to be more daily news. And so as a result of that, it just to me it doesn't kind of ring hollow. It doesn't really resonate, Yeah. So I don't know that. They may win and the strategy may prove well, but I mean, if the Republicans have got a shot to win the governor's mansion, and this is it. I mean, I think this is it. By watching how the Democrats have been playing this so far, it seems that the Republicans might actually have a decent shot here. So this will be interesting to see.
Yeah, and I think that if I'm Youngkin, like I say, it's not Trump that I'm trying to imitate. It's Reagan, and ask that question: are you better off than you were when these guys took over? Right, 4 years ago, 8 years ago. I mean, are you better off? Here's what we've had happen, and just economic decline of the state, transportation problems of the state, education, trying to kill advanced math, woke theory being taught in the schools, achievement scores down. Everybody gets a trophy, award system for education systems in Virginia. So colleges declining. That's what I would look at. You're not better off than you were. These guys didn't really run the state very well. I mean, they have some ammo too, but
right.
But they haven't really been very successful.
Right. I mean, that's the thing too. I mean, it's like, are you trying to say we're going to continue the quote successes of Ralph Northam? Exactly what was that?
Yeah.
So yeah. So I don't see that plays well. So I've labeled this because I'm thinking I'm going to just call that this is what it is from now on. The landlords get screwed moratorium getting extended by the CDC until October 3rd. Cory Bush and the squad think that this is a victory for them. Now, here's the thing: is that I saw a story that I think was from an association that represents landlords or whatever. They were saying that the landlords have lost something like $26 billion since these first went into effect. And nobody's really paying attention to that. This is not made up of all large corporations and large landlords. There are a lot of mom and pop small landlords that are suffering along with this. And then there's the Supreme Court, which had said just recently that they couldn't extend. I mean, it would take legislative action by Congress to make this legal. But CDC's done this, so the whole thing is a little bit dicey to me.
Well, a couple of things on that. First of all, the Biden says that he asked a bunch of constitutional scholars, can he do this? And most of them said, no, you can't do it. He said, but if you said it's worth taking a shot, so I'm going to take a shot. And his attitude is, and this was their attitude about a lot of stuff, is by the time the courts work it out that we're on the wrong side of history here, the problem will be solved. Okay, and there's cynical. That's a cynical way of looking at it, but he's probably true there, because he's probably right there, because what happened here is the Democrats did not prepare people for this. The legislation had to be passed by Friday, and Biden let them know where we stood on this on Thursday. Hey, the courts won't do it. You've got to do something, Thursday afternoon. And Pelosi's like, we're going out of town tomorrow. We're not starting a legislative process on a bill when we're about to go on recess. And we've all scheduled recess, and you knew it was coming, and we knew it was coming. And so we're leaving town. And they did. And so he's like, oh, we got to come back and do this. Okay. Well, most of the people who are affected most of the renters, most of the people who are, and the landlords, they didn't hear about this until a day or two before it was going to happen. So, I think part of this was the timing of how people found this out. And like, we weren't prepared for it as a country. And, should we lift the moratorium? Sure. I mean, you got to, you can't ask the landlords of America to keep paying the freight here. But, and I think most of the landlords are in a situation where they're going to try to work with the tenants. If the tenants, are honest and upfront and, hey, what can we do to get even here? Obviously, we don't have 10 or 12 months of back rent ready to hand you to get totally even, but let's make a deal that gets us on the same page. I think that's going to happen all over America, but it can't happen, when you tell us Thursday that the problem starts Friday. I mean, that was a big like mistake these guys made, the administration made, was just not preparing the country for it.
All right, so Kristen has a question and a couple of other comments. One is Biden really get more votes than any president ever in Virginia? You can probably answer that. And then she had a couple other comments. There's socialism, as we're talking, by gifting rent and children money. And then what if we, we give more and more of our basic needs under the guise of COVID and never remove it, then we're on our way to socialism. And she's talking about BlackRock buying millions of single family homes. But she, as far as the socialism part, I mean, she's right. I mean, this is, we put a lot of things into effect because of COVID, under the guise of COVID. And as far as progressive left Democrats in particular, they want to see as much of that become permanent, right? And just keep doling out the money and everything like this. I mean, that is definitely, just trying to create this socialist, welfare safety net kind of a thing like this. And I, as someone who follows the stock market and a lot of other things, and I work part-time for an investment company and things like this, I don't really have a clear vision of where the economy is, because as we've gotten back, there are a couple things that are helping distort the economic picture. One has been this moratorium, and the other thing has also been the unemployment, benefits extensions, right? Because we don't really know where we are, until we see how everybody's doing once these things, if you don't have that, we can get a little bit more of a normal, to my mind, of how we're functioning. But if we're continuing to just dole out the money and keeping people afloat, I really don't have an idea of how some of these people are doing, and where the economy is. And we talked about businesses who can't fill jobs. We've got all kinds of issues because of these policies.
Right, that's right, and it has to start. You got to start winding this down at some point, right? But people need. I think the political blunder here that they didn't tell people what was coming, and so now you have to kind of redo. And I guess it's off again until October, right? And I think that that's the other thing.
October 3rd.
So that policy was directed by the CDC. So reading through my pocket constitution, I have not found any powers that derive to the CDC, right? That's either the president says we're doing this or he doesn't, right? But the CDC does not get to order moratoria, So
right. I mean,
it's another thing of just ascribing power to these people who've been really destructive to America. Public health has been the great failing of this whole thing has been that our public health bureaucracy is awful, right? And calcified and old thought and rigid and unresponsive. And, these are the guys we're saying, hey, here, we'll take a big shot out of the economy for you. And, we'll be dictating economic policy now so that you don't, get a disease that's less serious than the flu. Right?
Okay.
And that's basically what it is.
Yeah, right. Yep. So Bob has chimed back in quite clear what the Democrats are up to in expanding the scope of the government with COVID as the latest and presently most convenient excuse, which is true. I mean, this is we're seeing this. I mean, it's not just on the money side, but we've talked about this on the voting side, right? All the COVID and things that they have put into for votes, they want those to be made permanent, right? So yeah, this is we're heading down a very bad path here, and somebody's got to put a stop to this.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's being talked about now is a way of doing that is just widespread ignoring the mask rules. I don't know what you can do in public buildings and publicly owned buildings like schools. You're going to be running up against enforcement, but I think you're on good constitutional grounds to ignore it in a private business.
Yeah, and Kristen says everything they do hurts small business. I mean, I saw a thing on Twitter, or Facebook, or where it was anyway, but it was somebody who runs a small bakery somewhere in Utah. 27 years they've been running this family bakery. They need 7 employees to run the operation, and they have. They'll be down to about 4 because a couple of them are going to return to school. High school schools are starting up in the fall, and they can't find people to work for them. It's just they're like, this poor woman is saying if we can't find enough people, we may have to shut down. I mean, that's just a terrible thing. At 27 years in business, you can't find people to work for you anymore because of these government policies. Really are the nub of the matter. This is tragic. Joe Biden, what do you have to say about this?
Well, he says, pay more, pay them more.
That's right, pay more, exactly.
Compete with the government paying them to stay home. Pay enough money to where people say, okay, I won't stay home, I'll go to work. Like, how much money is that? You're going to pay people to work in a bakery shop, you're going to pay them $200,000 a year? No, you can't. You don't make $200,000 a year,
Yeah, it's fine with paying $10 a muffin or whatever it would be, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's ridiculous because you have the government injecting all this money into the economy, and you can already see the deleterious effects of that too.
Yeah, I mean, look, we've seen costs rise. We've talked about the Biden kind of, the inflation that we've seen here in the last 6 months spike, and there's lots of reasons for this. And Democrat policies have a place to play in all of them. And I've definitely seen, as I've gone out to some of my favorite places, that over time, the cost of the food has been creeping upwards and stuff like that. Which I haven't been. I mean, they've announced that their earnings are up. They're doing very well, but they've increased their prices, and they've seen that their customers are willing to pay the higher prices. There'll be a limit, where people are saying, I am only going to pay this much for a burrito, and then that's it, and then things will turn around. And so you've got to put, we've lived for a long time with low inflation. I remember growing up, when I was, in the 80s, when I was still a young man, late 70s, or, really, I guess I'll say late 70s during the Carter years.
Yeah.
I was getting like 15% on my money market, right?
Yeah.
But that's because inflation was more than that. I mean, it was nuts.
Yeah, 24% inflation.
Yeah, it was nuts. It was
prices climbing almost a quarter every year.
Yeah, I mean, you could, back in the days, you could get 6, 7, 8% on your passbook savings account, but you were losing money. Your money, you were losing money. You thought, oh, I'm getting this, but your money was being eroded by inflation by twice that easily. So the Democrats are, they've lost really any sight, or they haven't a semblance of things. All right. Anyway, I've run this through so much. We're now at the 2 minutes.
We're down to 2 minutes. The DOJ has ordered Trump's tax returns to be given to Congress. I still think there's one more court battle in that, and that Trump will win it. This is speculative. If they had a specific crime that was key to proving the crime, that would be a different matter. But this is, this is a see what's out there. Cast a wide net, see if there's anything in it. And Congress doesn't need his tax returns. And if Congress gets his tax returns, I think it's going to be sorely disappointed because, they're pretty routine tax returns, it turns out.
Yeah. I think they're reaching, and so I mean, Trump is filing. I guess he's filed a suit to block this or whatever. So this is going to have a little bit more kind of grinding through a little bit on this stuff. I just want to say that National Public Radio is like, okay, we knew they were liberal, we knew they were left. And then they now have adjusted their ethics rules for their journalists by giving them a lot more latitude to participate in demonstrations and rallies. I mean, one of the things that they can't be covering the rally or demonstration or participating in, but they can actually participate. It's like, okay, let's go, activist advocacy journalists. So much for independence. Okay, I was like, well, at least thank you, NPR, for removing any doubt about where we knew that you and your reporters stood on the issues.
Right, because then you can't do that. I mean, if you're going to be a reporter, you sort of take yourself out of doing some other stuff, and it's just that's the way it is. If you don't want to do it, that's fine, but those are the rules. It's pretty clear.
All right. So we've reached the end. Thank you, Brian, for joining. Thank you, everybody out there, for joining us. Thank you, Kristen, for giving us a thumbs up here on the awesome show. We appreciate all the support. Appreciate you, Bob, also for your comments today, as always. Please stay safe, stay well. Remember, we live in the greatest country in the world. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. God bless America, and we'll see you again next week. And I assume Brian will be back in Virginia.
I will be.
All right. Well, back in Virginia. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. We'll see you again next week.